things. People might start making assumptions about your level of mental competence, and it's one thing you shouldn't assume about us is that we are mentally competent.
That is very true. I had someone question me today saying, how is it that you do all the stuff you do and you've been in retail for over 20 years? And I was like, well, I was born broken and it never fixed. So there you go.
I'm generally why am I not managing teams and stuff right now? People occasionally go, you could do the next job up, and I'm like, yeah, you see, it's not that I'm lazy, it's just that I just don't care. To quote one of my favorite films of all time, Office Space, I just don't care.
I think it's very fair. It's a clear, concise message of status of the relationship, shall we call it?
Yes. It also is like when you get to a level where you're like, I can live comfortably like this. Why would I commit to more hours? Like my boss has to be there until like midnight tonight because they're doing a thing, and you're like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. Like literally, someone tried to call me from work while we were online last week doing the show.
Nope.
Yeah, I'm not answering that. I probably do get paid enough to do that, but no one's expecting me to, so I'm not.
Yeah. But that is enough of that. Ladies and gentlemen, you have tuned in for us live on Facebook.com/George Taron, live on Facebook.com/ nope, where am I? Twitch.tv/
have a T thing.
Yes, twitch.tv/FryBrain, the Fry Brain, and youtube.com/Armchair Producers. There we go. Got it. Woohoo!
Huzzah, you got there in the end, Grandpa.
Back in my day, there were so many social medias.
It was all one.
One. Now, last week, we were talking about the Oliver Stone 2008 movie, W, starring Josh Brolin as the titular Mr. President. We talked about the finale of WandaVision, but we had a bit of a lost week this week because Falcon and the Winter Soldier has not started. That starts tomorrow, as well as the public release of Zack Snyder's Justice League. So those are going to be probably going to take up a lot of our next week's show. But this week, we continue on with our chain movie. I got to pick, and I chose to follow on the ever wonderfully talented Jeffrey Wright from W to the 2005 Oscar winner for George Clooney, drama/thriller Syriana. Now, you had not watched this movie before.
No, I had. I did see this when it first came out.
What do you think, going back to it?
It was interesting. So I've been using IMDb now for probably the better part of 20 years, and I've been using the same login. And what's handy sometimes is you log on and you look at a film and go, I never saw that, and you see a rating next to it.
Yeah.
You're like,
I did see it, and I rated it? Wow.
So I watched for my other podcast, The Throwback, downloadable now on Spotify, wherever you get good podcasts. And we just recorded a new show this week where we talked about the Robert De Niro, Leo DiCaprio film about a boy.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw that film in high school, and I didn't like it because I was being forced to watch it. And I noticed on IMDb, I've given it a 6. And I'm like, what was I thinking? That's actually a significantly better film than a 6. It's actually very good. And underrated by a great deal, especially De Niro's performance. This film I saw in 2005 or 6 or whenever, and I gave it a rating of 9 on IMDb. And I am now in the exact opposite position to the one I was talking about with Attaboy, in the sense that I think I significantly overrated this film when I rated it the first time. I remember quite liking it. I remember thinking, George Clooney won the Oscar. Good, he deserved that. And now I'm thinking, why the fuck did they give him an Oscar for this? Apart from the fact he put on a lot of weight.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on this. I so fondly remember this movie, and I was at the Oscars where George Clooney won for this performance, and I was so happy. I was like, yes, everyone who I wanted to win Oscars won. And I was kind of bored by the movie, watching it again. It's like, okay, this is not at all how I remember it. I remember being just biting my nails thinking, this is really good, cranking up the tension and the interweaving stories. And
Um, that was it for me.
mm,
I found, I guess, the Clooney's performance wasn't bad by any stretch of imagination. Was it Oscar worthy?
mm,
I would argue maybe it was not.
mm.
But it was fine. What I
Yeah.
guess really bothered me about this film was how convoluted the plot was. It was
Yeah.
all over the shop, and at the
Yeah.
same, and in doing so, it jumped from story to story to story, and from location to location to location, and sometimes it would jump from location to location for one scene only.
Mm.
And I'm like, why am I jumping from the Middle East back to the States for one scene that isn't particularly relevant or important to the rest of the story?
Yeah.
And I remember a film everybody seems to like these days that I did not was Rogue One.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the main reasons I didn't like it was the first half hour, 40 minutes, is just them jumping from location to location to location, exposition, exposition, location, location. And it completely put me off. And something very similar happened here with Syriana in the sense that it was jumping around so much. I was really struggling to actually follow what was going on. And to actually remember exactly, hang on a second, what's Jeffrey Wright's character doing again? Why is he here? Why is he? And there are at least, how many would you say? At least 3 or 4 different plot lines going on throughout the film.
And lots of those storylines have elements in them that don't actually do anything to progress the narrative. Like, I think it's Jeffrey Wright's dad that keeps turning up. It's like, okay, he very clearly has an antagonistic relationship with his dad, but this isn't impacting him on any of his choices on what he's going to do on a moral level for the elements of the story he's involved with. It's not linking in with any of the other stories. It's not really doing anything except showing him as a bit of an uncaring ass. Okay, so you're trying to use it as a character building. I feel like watching this movie again and seeing the disparate storylines coming through, I feel like if they turned this into a miniseries and actually really went in on the character focus for this, the breakdown of Matt Damon's Brian Woodman and his family after the death of his son, one of his sons, that, and build that into more of why he's willing to get into bed with these people that are all fucking shifty. All of them are out for themselves, and going into the reasons why the CIA keep on saying, oh my God, Bob Barnes, George Clooney's character, keeps on sending all these memos. It's like, okay, you keep on giving this stuff, but you're not actually fleshing any of it out. You're just kind of going, this happened, this happened, this happened, boom.
And you're right, there's so much story that even though some of it could well have been interesting, I guess you could say, hang on a second, we've probably done it again. We have done it again, haven't we?
We have done it again.
We've done it again. We've jumped in to explain. We haven't told people what it's about.
What this is about.
So,
do we want to do the short version or the long version?
Let's do the short version because the film is very long.
Yes.
A politically charged epic about the state of the oil industry in the hands of those personally involved and affected by it, which is a very fluffy, light way of putting it.
Yeah.
Just give you no idea what the film's actually about. So we have several threads. We follow Bob Barnes, which is George Clooney's character, who is a CIA agent, I think.
He seems to be like one of these deep assets that, I don't know, the way that his higher-ups talk about him, they keep on referring back to Beirut 84, and it seems like maybe he's some kind of bit of a local legend within the CIA for clandestine information gathering or something, but I don't know, he's a bit of a laughingstock or not really cared about anymore. It's never fully explained as to who he is or what he does. And
I just assumed he was like a CIA guy. He kind of seemed like he was doing stuff overseas. That's kind of what CIA does. He's a spy of some description, I guess.
Yeah. But I mean, I think there's at least 2 instances where he's talking to people, and they ask him, "So what is it they say you're doing now?" And he just gives these nebulous answers. It's like, okay, you keep on giving this stuff, but you're not actually fleshing any of it out. You're just kind of going, this happened, this happened, this happened, boom.
And you're right, there's so much story that even though some of it could well have been interesting, In
at
fairness,
least,
that's probably what a CIA person would do.
yeah, but you should, if you're trying to get the audience invested in a character, you at least let the audience know what you're doing, because what you see of George Clooney is him walking around looking chunky, bearded, and tired, being tortured, or sitting in a cubicle a la Office Space. It's like, okay, this is a very nebulous character where there's character work here. Like, his people are talking about some of the stuff that he's done in the past and his connections, and the fact that he talks to a very quick cameo by William Hurt of like, is it safe for me to go back, and things like that. So like, oh, there's some interesting backstory there. Or show me something interesting, and it's like, nah, we're just gonna keep it all vague.
Very vague. So that's one plot. This is Bob Barnes, CIA kind of spy kind of guy, doing spy shit in exotic locales around the world, and arguing with his superiors, I guess, and being a general pest.
Yeah, and not being a good father.
Not by in one scene.
Yeah.
In which they completely waste. What's his name? The director's son, whose name escapes me. He's from.
Yep.
Yeah, and you know his son. You'd be like, oh yeah, I've seen him around. He's in stuff. He's been in the Handmaid's Tale, amongst other. Max Minghella.
Yes.
Who's a fine actor in his own. So one scene with him, good luck. Spot him. But so I guess one of our other threads is the story of Matt Damon's character, Brian Woodman. He's married to Julie, played by Amanda Peet, as you sort of mentioned last week. For that 5 minutes in the mid 2000s, where she was, famous and getting A-grade roles. And he is a family man and some sort of financial analyst who does TV talk. He appears on TV to talk about oil futures and that kind of shit. He gets invited to do a pitch for our third plot line, which is, I guess, a family drama about a royal family. I don't think we've given the exact country. Somewhere like the UAE or Kuwait or Saudi Arabia, where
it's Kazakhstan.
There's a lot of talk of Kazakhstan.
There's a lot of talk of Kazakhstan, and there's a lot of talk of Iran, but
I don't know if this story is actually Kazakhstan itself, because it's a little bit more Middle Eastern than Kazakhstan, where we follow, I guess, a power struggle between a modernist reformer member of a royal family, Dr. Bashir. It's hard to see him as anything else. Played by Alexander Siddig, who plays Prince Nasir Al Subai, and he is the potential heir apparent, and it's sort of a power struggle between him and his brother about who will become the next emir. He is a modernist, a reformer, and he's kind of pushing against the conservative establishment in his family, and at the same time, to some degree, foreign powers who see his modernization ideas as a threat to the established order. And then there's a fourth plot thread follows Jeffrey Wright playing Benedict Holliday, who is a lawyer, accountant, forensic accountant of some description, an investigator,
an investigative analyst.
He's investigating potential fraud or a deal. It's a major merger between two oil companies happening, and he's basically being given the task of figuring out if there's anything untoward going on at the companies that are involved in the merger, so he can sort of root that out before the merger goes ahead. And his is potentially the most confusing, because I don't really understand why it's there.
Yeah, it doesn't really feed much. I think it could be interesting, someone navigating those very murky waters, and you get these interesting momentary characters, like the interactions with Chris Cooper and what's his name? The odd guy that's always got he's like he has that big old rant about corruption. What the fuck is his name?
Sorry.
I'll find it in a minute. But yes, Tim Blake Nelson.
Yes.
There's some interesting characters. It's like, okay, these are larger than life personalities in the oil industry and in congresses and things like that. That could be an interesting political avenue to go for. But just things just happen, and then before you know it, without explanation, it's like, okay, well, we're going to make a deal. Instead of actually playing this straight down the line, we're going to just have these sacrificial lambs that we're going to throw in here and there until we get what we want. It's like, okay, so this is actually, his story is supposed to be about the corruption of his soul, metaphorically speaking, because he was, when they first introduced him, Christopher Plummer is, why is the bad guy or the head of an organization always gardening when bad shit's happening?
Someone saw the Godfather a few times. Said hello to Richard, who's watching.
Hey, Richard,
friend of a show.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. I think it's like someone saw the Godfather a few too many times. That scene where Marlon Brando died. But that's cool. I want to do that.
Yeah, but then it's like, okay, so Christopher Plummer, 99.9% of the times is great when he's on screen, and he always just holds the screen, and he has this essentially a monologue at Jeffrey Wright saying, "Oh, everyone at my law firm is a lamb thinking that they're a lion. Well, I want to know if everyone thinks you're a lamb and you're actually a lion." It's like, okay, is that what we're going to see here? The lamb become the lion? No, we're not. We're just going to see the lamb become a lamb? What? But then you are forgetting the fifth storyline of the kids.
Oh, well, that's a very minor sort of. I would include that under Matt Damon's thread.
No, I'm not talking about Matt Damon's kids. I'm talking about the
kids in the foreign country.
The ones who lose their job because of the merger, and then they become beekeepers, and then they're just shown a missile that George Clooney sold someone at the beginning of the movie, and it's just the slow evolution of them becoming radicalized, I think.
Yeah,
but
interestingly, that's right. I did forget that. And interestingly, that's possibly the most interesting storyline in the film, and we never really given much of an explanation.
No,
I mean, it does sort of come to fruition at the end of the film. I won't spoil it in case people haven't seen it, but we do see the conclusion of that arc. But it doesn't really ever feel particularly natural. It feels tacked on. But unfortunately, like I said, the tacked on story is the most interesting part of the film.
Absolutely.
And actually, there's an interesting story there about the exploitation of foreign workers in the Middle East, and things like the World Cup next year is going to be in Qatar, and the amount of foreign workers who died building the stadiums that they're going to hold the soccer games in next year, assuming it goes ahead. Is quite scandalous, and we're all going to go, la-di-da, we don't need to worry about those.
Look at the bones just sticking out of the ground, it's fine.
Watch the soccer, But anyway, so I think one of the thoughts, so you can see there 5 separate plot threads. Now, it takes a very talented director to keep all those plates spinning and entertaining and interesting, and then tie them all up very nicely. Like, I'm thinking someone like, I guess, Fanboy had on. Tarantino's famous for it. He did it a lot. Few others have really pulled it off quite so well. It was very fashionable in the 90s. I think the film Go was had a lot of those.
This was kind of one of those. There was a stint where the Oscars loved those multi-thread movies like this. There was Crash. There was God, it was there was one with Brad Pitt in it, and Sean Penn, and there were a couple. So like each year there was like, oh, this is just interweaving stories. This is what we're doing. We're getting these high class actors involved in stories that kind of move around each other, not necessarily touching, but just reflecting each other. And it's like, okay, yeah, that had its moment.
Interesting, the director and writer here, Stephen Gahan, I assume it's pronounced, wrote and directed Traffic.
Yeah.
Which is again something very similar style of story. And Traffic won, I think, a Best Picture Oscar, but I recall it being an extraordinarily weak year for Best Picture Oscars. And one of those ones where you look back, it's like the one when Gwyneth Paltrow won for Shakespeare in Love, and people are like, That didn't age well.
Mm-mm.
So Steve Gahan, I don't think is a man for the job here. But interestingly, it's a very serious Richard interweaving stories. Isn't that rather Marvel? In fairness, here this does predate the MCU, so I'm going to give
That's true.
Syriana credit. But I remember liking it quite a bit. It has a good rating. It has a 76 on Metacritic. What I was thinking while I was watching it, and I was driving home after watching it with a friend, was, is this, and it actually does link in nicely with W in a way. This is a film of a similar vintage. This is a film of the mid-2000s. It's a film in the War of Terror, the War on Terror years, which kind of still going, but we kind of forgotten about it.
Don't talk about the war.
So we're not interested anymore. It's over, and we won, of course. But films about oil and the oil industry seemed very present at the time. Right, it was important. I feel like this film is sort of a reflection of the political climate at the time. Dick Cheney was the head of a big company that was an oil company, and made all Halliburton was the company's name. It made all the money from the war on terror. And I almost feel like the big company at the center of this is very Halliburton-esque.
Yeah. I think that's right. There's a lot of cynicism about the actions of all of the American characters and the representation of American businesses and things like that in the Middle East in this movie. Everything seems, there's no one who's a knight in shining armor in the movie. Everyone is beaten down and tired of the way things are. Everyone is working to try and improve it, and the big corporations just keep on plowing on and nothing ever really changes. And I think that is kind of reflective of the time, as you say, because everyone was sick and tired of it at that point. And it's really interesting because I think that period of time during the Bush era and basically that mid 2000s, it's ripe with some really interesting storytelling and going kind of deep dive into a lot of the political and kind of corporation sides of things and how they work together, fight each other, and how things like giant land masses in the Middle East get caught in the fucking middle of people playing Monopoly, essentially. That is fascinating if you give it the time. It's got seeds of really interesting ideas and interesting stories, but it never gives any of them real time to flourish. There's none that really stand out shining. The fact that the radicalization storyline is the most interesting, and it has the kind of the least to do with any of the kind of anti-American kind of feel of it all. It's like, this is just about someone who's going through a lot of bad fucking luck because of other people playing this game above their heads. They lose their job, they lose their right to work, they have to go back, and they're just getting more and more despondent, and they're looking for a way out.
I can kind of, first things first, I remember the film you were thinking of. You're thinking of Babel, the Brad Pitt film.
Yes, thank you.
Secondly, I think the one thing that did resonate with me is I've been, because I'm back at school now and I'm literally writing an essay about terrorism this week.
Here we go, the academic.
But the idea of throwing a rock into a pond and those ripples ripple out, or to use a different metaphor, the old one of, a butterfly flaps its wings and around the world is a tsunami or whatever, In this case, the butterfly flapping its wings is the merger of the two oil companies, which leads to the people losing their job, which leads to them having no other work, which leads to them becoming radicalized, which leads to them doing what they do. And that was there, but it just probably would have been, as I sort of come back to, it would have been more interesting if that was the core of our story. And at the end of the day, I don't really know what exactly George Clooney was doing. What was Bob Barnes' purpose in the whole thing? And, why was he trying to do what he was doing? I mean, maybe I'm certain it was probably there at some point, but there was so much going on. when I got to that final scene, which I won't spoil, where Bob does what he does, and what happens to him happens. It was like, wait a second, how did he end up here again? Why is he doing this again? What is he hoping to achieve by doing what he's doing? I think you have to go back and watch this again to figure it out. I think it's interesting to see how poorly this film has aged.
Yeah, I think so, and it's a shame because, like I keep coming back to, there's little bits in it that could be really good if they were given time, if they were fleshed out. That's why I think that a mini-series, being able to stretch it out and maybe even just have like hour-long episodes on each of the 5 storylines, that would be great. And maybe have a little bit more pointed ripple effect. Like at different times they're watching, when you cut from one to another, they're seeing the same newspaper and it's like a slightly different spin on how something's like, in America, it's sort of like a merger of these 2 oil companies sparks political intrigue, blah, blah, blah. And then you cut over to the Middle East and it's sort of like a different angle on it. And it's one of the characters just casually looking at it. So you get a little bit more of that connective tissue and a timeline of when things are happening. Because it feels like the timeline for this movie just speeds up, slows down, speeds up, goes back, goes forward a lot. It's a bit discombobulating watching this movie and going, okay, yeah, so that's so at this point when I'm watching this guy, that's happening over here. Oh no, I think I'm wrong. And it's really annoying. It's a shame.
Richard has an interesting take. When Hollywood gets involved in the Middle East, there are so many different stories, so much real-world information. I feel the audience gets confused as to what they're meant to take away. I would tend to agree with that. I think this film made me think of the Matt Damon film Green Zone, which I famously hate because I read the book, which they bought the rights to turn into this film, and then they just basically said, "We'll use the name and nothing else," sort of. But it was really boring. And again, to Richard's point, I kind of walked away. What exactly is that film saying? What exactly am I supposed to feel after seeing that film? And I felt the same way after Syriana. I was confused. I was bored. I was struggling to keep up with the different plot threads. It could have done with cutting 2 or 3 of them and focused on 2, maybe the radicalization and Bob Barnes and maybe Matt Damon. That would have really, because I think Matt Damon is probably the most likable character in the film.
Yeah. But even then, he's still kind of the way that he deals with the death of his son, which it comes to something. I had to put the subtitles on for a little bit, and the kids are never named. They're just younger son or elder son. It's like, okay, so you want me to really emote with this because a child died, not because it is Brian Jr. or anything like that. It's so like, okay, you're using that to elicit a reaction and emotion from me, but you haven't earned that yet because you haven't fleshed it out. I honestly would find this way more interesting if it was the radicalization and the political machinations of the Amir's family, everything around there, because that was like, we get these brief little moments of this other son that seems to be oh yes, on my birthday I got this boat because I graduated and my premiums came through and nothing you give me can possibly like that. And then you've got this other son who's trying to be more forward thinking, kind of going, yes, we need to involve women in our societies and blah 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 blah. And then we've got this old father figure who at the start he seems like this powerful kind of thing. You could have, to use a shit variation, you could have done a bit of a Game of Thrones kind of vibe to it, but set it modern times in the real world, and that would be really interesting to watch.
And even ended in a big fight like in Star Trek where we're in the pit with a big sword going dun, 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 dun.
It's so good, I have the high ground.
Miss Foxy B says the Falcons were the most likable characters. That's a controversial opinion. The Falcons, I think, have actually been. I think they might have had blackface photos taken while they're in college. So
Oh no,
we don't talk about the Falcons.
Yeah, we cannot talk about them.
The Falcons have been cancelled. How did the death add to the story? It's an interesting question, actually. What exactly did Matt Damon's son's death add to the story, apart from really getting him in with the royal family? That was essentially the point of his son's death, was he gained an inside track with the royal family because they were embarrassed and felt guilty, I guess, to some degree, over the death of his son. I mean, apart from that, I think it's a fair question. I don't know that it was a great deal else.
Yeah, it was just another inciting incident for other things that never really paid off. And you did get that quite good scene between Matt Damon and Prince Nazir, and they're kind of like, oh yes, and Matt Damon does the maths. It's like, okay, that's 75 million, great, and how much for my other kid? And that is actually a really good scene. But then it's kind of like consequences in the MCU. It's never talked of again.
I mean, Amanda Peet kind of digs at him about it once, and when she moves back to America, which is that's really, it's just sort of there to sort of be a plot pivot point to sort of move our character to this position we need him to be. And without something dramatic like that, he wouldn't have managed to get access to the royal family. So he did it. What did the death add to the story, Foxy B? It didn't add anything. I feel it was just plot contrivance. Yeah,
it was a MacGuffin and nothing more, sadly.
And a shocking moment. I mean, it's kind of. I mean, there's not very many interesting things happen in this film.
Not really. I mean, even the torture scene of George Clooney's character Bob, it's sort of like, okay, it's quite an interesting concept of someone just talking through and building up that fear within the person who is being victimized. But it then just gets nipped in the bud, and it's like, okay, wait, why did that happen? Why did that guy capture Bob? Why was he? What did Bob do to deserve that? What is he being double crossed? And it never gets fully fleshed out and explained in any way that you can go, oh, that was cool. You just go, okay, that happened because they needed to freeze him out of the CIA.
I have to be honest. There were a number of moments where we were watching it, and there were, who was that guy?
Yeah.
Why did they kill that guy? I thought he was with them. Why would they kill that guy if he was with them? Oh, he wasn't really with them. It's like there are a number of those moments, and like normally, I can answer like the plot and go, well, he's doing this because it's reason. Like you got to again, you got to mention earlier where Jeffrey Wright's dad pops up at the end, and we were like, who's that guy again? I'm like,
yeah,
I don't really remember who he is. Like, he was in the movie earlier, but I don't know why. I wasn't really paying attention. Or I was just so bored that I was like, can we get back to the actual? Was anything explained? I switched off Foxy. I don't know if there was. I certainly walked away from this going, it's a bit of a mess. It's a bit of a mess, and I think I was a bit premature with that 9.
Yeah. Well, we've dug the claws in long enough on Syriana. Travis, it is your turn to choose the next link in the chain.
And it is, and it's going to be an interesting one this week because I have decided we've kind of been floating around the 2000s a little bit. We've been having it a little bit easy with films that we know.
If you say, well, Amanda Peet's, her first movie was Death Machine 2, I'm going to be so pissed.
She wasn't in Death Machine 2.
It was Matt Damon, damn it!
In a dream she could have got. She couldn't have been in that film. I did consider very closely the 1978 film Star Crash, starring Christopher Plummer. That's a 4 on IMDb, and is available in its entirety on YouTube. But I don't think I've been forgiven for for Death Machine. So, but we are following Christopher Plummer, but we're going back. We're leaving our comfort zone, and I think I'm picking a film I know I haven't seen. I suspect you haven't seen it either. It is the 1967 film The Night of the Generals.
I've heard of this movie.
So this film stars Omar Sharif, Peter O'Toole, Tom Courtenay, Donald Pleasance. So, and of course, the great late. And I thought this would be appropriate considering Christopher Plummer just passed away a couple of months ago. Now, I don't know if we followed Christopher Plummer to Star Trek 6, so he was involved in the Star Trek 6 exchange. I can't recall.
No, that was Kim Cattrall. No, wait. We did use Christopher Plummer because we went to the Inside Man.
Am I allowed to use him again?
You know what? Because we haven't gone that far back in the cinema history, I'm going to say yes, we can. And
also, I didn't pick The Sound of Music, so I mean, I could have.
Could have, yeah.
I appreciate the indulgence, but this has got a 7.3 on IMDb. Quite a cast, you know. Peter O'Toole, considered one of the great actors of all time. Donald Pleasance, I think, is an Academy Award winner. I feel like you should be able to take us somewhere interesting from this.
Oh, yes. I've already got some ideas.
And we're going to follow Peter O'Toole to Troy.
No, although I am mildly tempted to just go the very easy route and just go Stardust, because Stardust is an adorable movie, but that takes us to the mid-2000s again, and I can't do that.
I guess it'd be interesting to go back to an era, but we don't actually explore a great deal, and you know, see if a film from a different era, and yeah, it's just to challenge ourselves up a little bit for a film we haven't seen before, which I think was kind of the idea behind why we started doing it. It was Streets of Rage, wasn't it?
Streets of Fire.
For those who want to play along at home, this is available for rental on YouTube and from Google Play.
Alrighty, fantastic. For anyone who doesn't know, The Night of the Generals, in 1942, a Polish prostitute and German agent is murdered in Warsaw. Suspicion falls on 3 generals, and Major Grau of German intelligence seeks justice, which ends up taking decades.
Sounds good to me. I like Nazis.
Well, careful how you phrase that.
Touche. Movies about Nazis. Generally entertaining. And Richard, I think, has a suggestion for you for your next.
The Incredible Journey could be a good one.
The one where they shrink him. Was that Incredible Voyage?
I think that's The Incredible Voyage.
Where they shrink him and put him inside someone's body. I don't know. I think I had that as a kid. Anyway, that is in the hands of my co-host, who will make an advised decision. And as a reason, if I had gone with The Sound of Music, he would have waited. He would have waited for me in the backseat of my car in a car park at some point with the duct tape.
No, there are certain rules for me watching musicals, and one of them is, strangely, it has to involve Nazis.
Well, I mean, a Nazi musical. So that and The Producers.
Exactly. That, The Producers, South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut.
It's springtime for Hitler and Germany. If you haven't seen The Producers, I do highly recommend it. It's a wonderful film.
Watch the original version. Don't watch the remake.
I could also note that Donald Pleasance played the president in Escape from New York. Just saying.
I am mildly tempted by that. And there's a few, like, Go to Halloween. He did play Dr. Loomis.
I saw Escape from New York. Escape from LA was on TV recently, and I watched some of it. I'm like, whoa. There's a film I haven't seen in a long time.
I already know where we're going.
Wow. That sounds exciting.
I am so happy because any excuse to watch this movie is amazing. Anyway.
This week.
All right. Now,
have you been watching anything else this week?
Yeah, actually. I didn't feel like I got quite enough of Josh Brolin, and I wanted a little bit more Elizabeth Olsen in my life. So I went on to Stan and watched the 2013 Spike Lee directed version of Oldboy.
I suggested this for last week, but I heard it wasn't very good.
It's not that it's not very good. It's just kind of pointless if you really... If you found... Because the original movie was directed by Chan-wook Park. He did Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. He did Stoker. He's not really ventured into Western cinema. He's generally sticking to, I think he's Korean? Not sure. But
I think it's a Korean film. I recall hearing about it, yeah.
But that was a phenomenal movie. And the way that the story is told and the revelations that happen throughout it are masterfully done. It is brilliant. It is heartbreaking. It is terrifying. You feel horrible. It's a similar kind of breakdown of the audience psyche as you get in Requiem for a Dream in some ways. So when you're going off of that and you basically just remake it for the more delicate sensibilities in the cinematic world of the Western Hollywood machine, where they are never going to go as intense and visceral and dark as a lot of cinema from Asia comes out. You look at any of the remakes of horror movies that have come out of Japan and Korea and things like that, they are always less than the original. Not necessarily bad, like Gore Verbinski's version of The Ring was still a very good movie, and for Hollywood standards, it was actually pretty good horror. But it just wasn't the same as watching the original version of The Ring. And the same kind of falls in with this. Josh Brolin plays Joe Doucette, who very early on is shown to be an alcoholic, a bit of womanizer, just generally a bit of human trash. And then he gets abducted for 20 years. He is left in a room where he is fed, where he is kept healthy. He has a TV. He has a fake window that simulates day and night cycle for him. He is protected. He is purposefully kept alive for 20 years. And then mysteriously, he is released. And the questions of who did this, and revenge are primary on him. We meet Elizabeth Olsen's Marie when Joe gets he's chasing after someone who he thinks has something to do with his abduction, and then she's a nurse and seems to be very willing to help him. She seems, and through the story, you learn that she was into some drug of some description, and she is reformed, and she's trying to help people. But everything about it, all the performances are great, and Spike Lee is a great, accomplished director. The film looks good, everything about it, but it's all kind of, I don't know whether it's just because I'm such a fan of the original that I was just looking at going, okay, yep, that's good, but it's not as good as what happened before. It just always feels less than, which is kind of unfair on everyone involved because they all do great jobs. Josh Brolin is fantastic in this character where he's very good at playing horrible human. And at the start, you don't like him. He's got this big beer belly on and he just looks unhealthy and kind of strangely feels sickening around him. And then we just follow him through these 20 years in this room, and just his slow kind of crumbling of his psyche as he tries to stay positive, succumbs to grief, builds up this hatred, learns to fight just by punching a wall and just getting stronger. And then it's kind of a standard revenge plot. And unfortunately, one of the real weak links in it is someone who's generally quite good at being a character actor, and that's Sharlto Copley, who shot to fame because of District 9. He was in Chappie. He was in the A-Team. He's popped up around the place, and he's usually this. He usually disguises himself in a different voice and mannerisms and attitude. He's quite chameleonic in a lot of ways. He's generally a good actor, but here he plays a character, Adrian, and it feels like it's from a different movie, and it doesn't work. And so everything about it, just whenever he's on screen, it's like, okay, you're not scary. You're not intimidating. You don't come across as a horrible genius or a malicious person. You just seem like a petty school bully, which maybe is part of the reasoning behind it because of the inciting incident for this long drawn out revenge against Joe Doucette. And it's just, I watched it in the cinema and I thought, okay, that was all right, but it wasn't great. And going back to it, I just feel bad for everyone involved, because if the original didn't exist, this would probably be a really good piece. And they actually, unlike what I thought they were going to do, they kept the twist ending and the revelations of who everyone is. I won't spoil it for anyone who's interested.
Including me.
It's a good twist. It's a good gut punch that just makes you go, oh, fuck. It's not as well delivered in this movie as in the other one. And especially going back to it now, because both the lead actors, in fact, Samuel L. Jackson's also in this movie, and he's one of the main characters in the movie as well. Having all three of them being very prominent Marvel characters, it's a little hard to kind of go, oh yeah, that's Wanda and Thanos.
There are four. Pom Clementio is in this film as well.
Oh, yes, that's right.
I'm obviously pronouncing that incorrectly because I'm not French. But of course, she plays Mantis.
Yes, that's right. Yes, my apologies, Pom.
So quite a heavy. Interesting that we've got future Best Actor Oscar winner Rami Malek in here and fairly well down the list as well.
Yeah, he's a bit of a blink and you'll miss it cameo in it. Really, it's not when you think of he's the new bad guy in the new Bond movie that will one day come out. It's
Legend
like,
has
okay, it. Yeah, the myths, but it just
sounds like a film that's less than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, and it's a shame because everything about it is solid. It's good. Spike Lee was coming off of, continuing a generally pretty successful run. I mean, just looking back, this was 2013. The last movie that he did was Inside Man, which we talked about a while ago, and that was a good solid movie. Yeah, and it was a more mainstream movie for a Spike Lee movie, because you think about, like, She Hates Me was the movie he did before that, in the 25th Hour.
25th Hour is good.
And that's not even talking about his earlier stuff of Do the Right Thing, Malcolm X, You're Gonna Have It, those kinds of things. It's like, okay, he ventured into this mainstream, and apparently there's a sequel for Inside Man that's been developed, and then his next one is a remake of an Asian psychological brutal drama thriller. It's like, okay, those are odd choices, and it's like, it seems like a waste of his talent.
Do you like that Spike jumps around and does different stuff now? So he did a film like Black Klansman was a film we reviewed in the show and Rev really enjoyed. I know I enjoyed it. I think you did too.
Yeah.
He was in I haven't seen it, but The Five Bloods has been quite well reviewed from last year. And apparently, according to his IMDb page, Untitled Spike Lee musical. I would definitely musical about the origin of Viagra, Pfizer's erectile dysfunction drug. Shut up and take my fucking money.
My head just suddenly filled with every sperm is sacred.
I would watch the living shit out of that. And I don't like musicals. And
Says you, and yet you've watched so many at this point.
well, I've been around a while. I'm old. That sounds fucking amazing. I remember I took my girlfriend at the time to on our first Valentine's together back in 2005. I took her to see Debbie Does Dallas the musical, and she was like, "What the fuck is this?" And I'm like, "Hey, you can go to work tomorrow." And who else is going to be able to say, "My boyfriend took me to see Debbie Does Dallas the musical"? Thank you very much. You can thank me later. It's completely original and it's great. And it was a wonderful production, I should say. Very funny.
Well, there you go. So I think this movie is sitting on a 5.7 out of 10 and a 49 Metacritic. I think that's a little harsh, but at the same time, it's not too far off the mark. I give it probably a 6 or a 7, just around that, because its solid performance is just kind of unnecessary if you've seen the original.
How long after did we break up? About 12 years. She later bragged about it. She later would go on and go, "Oh, well, we saw Debbie Does Dallas the music and it was so funny." And she sort of basked in the hipness of the fact that we'd seen this thing. It was actually a very popular off-Broadway musical. And they were like, "Oh, it's hilarious and funny. You're so edgy and cool." And only I remember the fact that she thought it was a joke and was giving me the side eye all the way through the fucking thing. But yeah, it was funny.
Whatever helps you sleep at night, sir. Whatever helps you sleep.
It does help me.
But that's one of the things. The other thing, I teased it a little while ago. But I'll actually talk about it a little bit more now. And that is one of the current hot anime manga in the world. And that is Demon Slayer. Demon Slayer Season 1 is available on Netflix. And in many ways, it's your typical anime in that it's a lot of kind of elaborate action sequences with a young protagonist fighting against the oppressions of the world. And in this particular world, demons are a fairly prevalent thing. And there are people that get trained up and just wander from town to town, hunting demons and attempting to right the wrongs of the world. The difference here is our main protagonist, which I'm just going to bring it up right now. Here we go. That's it. Here we go. So the plot for it is a family is attacked by demons and only 2 members survive. Tanjiro and his sister Nezuko, who is turning into a demon slowly. Tanjiro sets out to become a demon slayer to avenge his family and cure his sister. So you've probably already actually seen images from this anime around the place. Like there's one guy who's got 2 swords and he wears a boar's head mask. The sister has sort of like got these big eyes, and then there's looks kind of like a scroll case that's permanently
Hang on a second. Sorry. Anime character with oversized eyes. Now you're just talking crazy.
I know. It's mad, right? It's madness. But it's quite good. But I don't think it's actually really doing anything new. It's certainly to me, it's like, okay, this is very typical anime fare. The animation is stunning. It is really, really beautifully animated. The kind of sequences and sword fighting skills that Tanjiro learns, it takes 2 years of learning before he becomes a demon slayer, and even just then, a very novice demon slayer. The way that he talks, he kind of does the Sherlock Holmes, Robert Downey Jr. style, trying to map out the fight in his head before it happens. They do something a little along those lines in this, and it's interesting. I'm listening to it dubbed because I'm not a snobby asshole. The dub is good, and everything about it is solid. But it's kind of half the course now with a lot of animes, because they either very successful straight away and they'll get season after season after season, and there'll be a machine and they'll end up being like Naruto or Full Metal Alchemist or Death Note, things like that, where they'll run their full course because they are just big cash machines. Or they'll do a season, won't take off, and it'll just disappear. No one will talk about it ever again. This is still early on. It's only been airing since last 2019, so 2 years at this, a year and a half at this point. So whether or not it has the staying power, don't know, but it's certainly one of the most lauded animes out there. And there was a movie that got released in the cinemas, and it's one of the biggest blockbuster draws of the year, which is a bit of a funny way of putting it in a COVID world. And there's not much in the cinemas, but it's interesting. And if you've got like, I'm watching it on Anime Lab, which is just an app on Xbox, PlayStation, iPhones, all of your smartphones, and you can just watch it with ads, and it's free. The only limitation is you don't. Some of them you don't get to. No, I'm watching this on Netflix, but I'm also watching other things on Anime Lab. It's good if you want something that's just gonna kind of take up a chunk of time, 20 minutes, half-hour episodes. It's all right. I don't think you'd like it, Travis.
Well, that's true. It's well documented that I'm not a great anime aficionado. Especially
right. We can still be
with
friends.
Fantasy ones of sword fighting and stuff. It's so cliche. That's why I didn't mind the lawyer one you recommended a while back.
Oh, which one was that? I can't remember.
The guy's a lawyer or something. He scares off ghosts or something, and you got the guy.
Oh, Mob Psycho 100.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a lawyer. I can't remember.
Yeah,
he's
a
like
paranormal investigator.
That's right. He's like a Ghostbustery kind of guy. And he's kind of like a complete fraud.
Yeah. So that was kind of fun. I have started watching. There's another one. I'm going to see if I can actually get it, because it's a tricky name to reference. It's another one that you would not like, but it's an interesting concept. Moshuko Tensei, jobless reincarnation. Yeah. So the first episode, it starts with there's a car crash, and you just hear people talking about how this guy saved these girls, but he's dead. And then it's a white screen, and just this guy going, "Oh, okay, so I'm dead then. Well, I wish I'd done more with my life. That's kind of boring." And he's just having this kind of internal monologue, and then slowly visuals come into it, and he just sees this woman in front of him, and he's like, "Who the hell are you? Why aren't you?" And he just starts trying to work it out, and then eventually he's like reaching out towards her, and he sees these baby hands. He's like, "What the hell? Am I in a baby?" So he's like,
"It's Soul, then."
No, because he gets reincarnated into a world of fantasy and magic, and it is also populated by beast people.
Do they make mangas about things that aren't fantasy and magic and sword fights?
They absolutely do. Yes, there's a plethora of sports-based anime out there that is insane. And Food Wars is really good for cooking. It's very inspiring.
I remember mentioning Food Wars a while ago. Yes, that's very. If it wasn't so fucking weird.
That's true. But people can say that about us.
Challenge for you, and you're probably going to be answered very easily. What is is there manga that is set in the real world? Is there realistic manga that confronts real world issues in a realistic way?
Well, yeah. And if you're looking at animation in that, then just look at Grave of the Fireflies. Only yesterday.
That's a very good film. But I mean, they're pretty rare by my
you're thinking more of the kind of slice of life kind of thing, yeah.
Like, I mean, could you tell a story like Syriana about international global politics in a manga, or are they strictly about escapism in one way?
No, you absolutely can. They're just not they're not built into the machine. Usually with a lot of manga, it seems like they are made to make money. The manga industry and the anime industry in Japan is run by this. There's the same people that run Disney. Essentially, is
the
that
manga
idea?
audience aren't looking for it. In other words, they're not. They're looking for escapism in their content.
Yeah, they're looking for something that they can get a popular musical group to do the theme song and end song for. They can merchandise the shit out of it. That's what they do. But there is like an independent side where you can go into these like mini-series sorts of things and just have these far more serious, realistic things. Like there's stuff like a manga that I've got is called Uzumaki, and it's just spirals, and it's just these interconnected stories that are, it's horror, and it's fucked up, and it's great. I'll lend it to you because it's very, very cool. Usually if you write manga Uzumaki, you'll probably get a lot of Naruto because that's his name. But at the same time, you'll end up getting this black and white manga just called Uzumaki. And it's very, very good. You'd probably actually really like it, thinking about it.
Anything's possible.
Yeah. But I'll have to lend it to you because I got the full compendium of it. It's
I am being deliberately difficult about it. I know this shit isn't for me.
No, that's fine. That's fine. But let's talk about more things that are for you, as you've seen more modern movies again.
I went to the cinema a couple of times.
Unbelievable.
I know, right? It was a cinema. It was literally 10 minutes walk from my house, and it's a beautiful old Art Deco cinema. And I actually hadn't been there before about 4 weeks ago when I saw Promising Young Woman. But I got to go twice, unplanned, but that's what happened. I was bored on Friday night, so I went and saw Nomadland.
Nomadland.
And
what is Nomadland?
Nomadland is the 2020 film. After losing everything in the Great Recession, a woman embarks on a journey through the American West, living as a van-dwelling modern-day nomad.
Okay.
It has been nominated for 6 Oscars.
Okay.
I would put it in my thoughts as being the favorite for Best Actress, Best Picture, Best Director.
Okay.
It should be no means my vote for it would not be for it would not I would not vote for it if I were an Academy member. And God knows my fucking membership still hasn't come through. God knows why.
Mine came through the other week, but I'm just not going to use it.
Yeah, it's fine. You get the free DVDs and just pirate them. That's it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't vote for this film in any of those categories. But I'm just saying I feel like it's the kind of film the Academy will vote for those. And it's the hot favorite, I think, for Best Actress. It stars Frances McDormand. The other notable actor in here is
David Strathairn.
There we go. Because pretty much the rest of the cast are not actors.
Okay.
They are real van-dwelling nomad type people.
Okay.
So this is film directed by Chloe Zhao, who is very hip right now because we don't. She made this film, which is very popular. She made a film a few years ago that everybody talks about called The Rider, which I have not seen. Interestingly, she went straight from Nomadland into directing The Eternals for Marvel.
That's right. Yes.
So quite a yin and yang, really, because this is very, very indie, lo-fi filmmaking, and into a giant Marvel thing with Angelina Jolie and stuff. Very curious to see the Eternals when it comes out, but we will wait for that when it does. Nomadland's a really weird film. It's kind of I've heard it described as a docu-fictional film.
Okay.
So it's kind of a meshing of documentary and feature film making. So Frances McDormand plays the character of Fern. So she plays a fictional character. Whereas most of the other people in the film kind of playing themselves in the sense that they are real people who live in vans and stuff. And yeah, David Strathairn, he's not playing himself. He's
playing a character called Dave.
It's a pretty deep character. And his son is in it as well, that Tay Strathairn. And he plays our character Dave's son. And maybe it's just a bit easier to call him by his real name. So we meet Fern. She's from a town called Empire, Arizona, where there was a big factory that made sheetrock
Okay.
Building materials or something. And that was pretty much the whole town. The reason that town existed was the factory that made this stuff. They decided to shut it down. So they basically shut the town down and moved everybody out. And I do find that angle of the film is quite interesting, following the Great Recession of the late 2000s, where it kind of destroyed a lot of people's lives. She's basically, her husband dies of cancer. She's left with almost nothing. And so her way of living at that point is to buy a van, fit it out in the back, and she drives around living out of the back of a van. So the film is when I say it's a docu-fiction, it doesn't have a traditional story arc. It doesn't have an act 1, act 2, act 3. We don't have a character arc of learning and, overcoming obstacles and then, becoming a better person at the end or anything like that. Stuff just happens.
Okay.
So we just follow Fern driving around, parking places, getting shitty part-time jobs, fixing problems with a van, hanging out with other van dwellers. That's kind of, so I guess our fictional part is Fern's journey through, just driving around the western states of the United States. The documentary part of it comes in with the story about there's a great deal of community between van dwellers, and they kind of have like their own little Coachella kind of thing in the desert where they all hang out and swap tips and stuff like that about how
Burning Man,
about how you can shit in a bucket comfortably and stuff like that, and how not to get kicked off someone's property and protecting yourself.
Do they? Is it like to camera kind of stuff, or
not talking heads? So think of a fly on the wall style documentary.
Okay.
So this is just a cameraman wandering around the I don't know what they call it. There's actually a whole name for what they call the van dwellers Coachella. I can't remember what it is.
A kind of a serious alternative to Borat.
A little bit. And it's interesting that apparently a number of the characters in the film, so actors in the film, I should say, didn't know who Frances McDormand was. Which is quite fascinating. I'm trying to find there's actually a guy that he's kind of a local, and I assume he really isn't a real person, an actual kind of like van dwelling guru. And at one point, Fern has this fantastic monologue about her husband and how she misses him and how much she loved him and blah blah blah. And he just assumed she was telling him about her actual husband. And then she found out later, oh, actually, no, my husband's name is Joel Cohen, and he kind of makes films as well. You might have heard of him.
Nah.
No. And so he was quite shocked, apparently, that she was like literally not a real person. Not the person, not Fern. So it's a really weird one for me. I was kind of torn about this. The lack of a story bothered me. I found myself getting a little bit bored occasionally because if I wanted to watch a documentary about van living, I'd probably watch Vice. There'd probably be something on YouTube, like it's a high budget documentary about people living in a van. But at the same time, that is an interesting lifestyle choice. Yeah. And a lot of people are literally making that choice in the United States to live that way, which does lead into the one interesting part of the film for me is that she works a lot of part-time jobs. So she works at a beet harvest, shoveling beets. She works in a campground as like a janitor kind of thing or a grounds person. She works in a roadhouse called Wall Drug. Place Drug. It's a real place. I had to Google it, and it does look fascinating. I can't wait to go. And the interesting thing is that they all kind of swap jobs, and they all hook each other up with different jobs. And so she meets David Strathairn's character. They get along well. He hooks her up for a Wall Drug job. And these are all people who are essentially retired. Yeah. In their 60s and 70s, and it's kind of an interesting yin and yang with the. Are you familiar with the concept of grey nomads?
No.
So it's a bit of an Australian thing where you retire, you sell the fucking ridiculously overpriced inner city property you bought in 1950 for like half a bag of twisties and a meat pie, for like $400 million to a boomer, so to some fucking, tech genius or something. And then you take that money and then you buy a camper van or a caravan, or, you know what I mean? Something like
Winnebago.
that. And you just drive and you just go driving around Australia all year.
Okay.
And there are a whole class of people who are grey nomad. It's kind of a cliche. Interestingly, the last year wasn't been good for them because a lot of them got stuck up in the Northern Territory.
Yeah.
And I can see the appeal of that, right? Like, can you imagine it's like going, I have no responsibilities today. I don't have to worry about money. I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to go that way.
Yeah.
I fucking well feel like it.
Yep.
I can see the appeal of that, but I would get bored quickly, I think. But anyway, the green nomads, it's the kind of the Australian version of it. I live in a van, but it's a fucking fancy ass Winnebago probably. And, and when you do it by choice, and it's kind of a way of enjoying, seeing the country and enjoying your life. Yeah. Whereas in the States, it seems like Nomadland's telling us it's people are forced into this. While they may choose it, they are choosing it under sufferance because, it's a country with basically no support net for people like
this or homelessness kind of
thing. And it's a version of it's a one step up from homelessness because you're in your car. And that these 70, plus people who should be retired, working shitty jobs that, should have been done by teenagers. That kind of part really, really resonated with me. Is like, this is saying something about, the kind of how brutal this country is.
Yeah.
I'm going very long-winded about this. I didn't like it a lot. It's beautifully shot. It's amazing to look at. Like, you've been to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've got too far out of town. The American West is incredibly gorgeous. I was lucky enough to drive from San Diego to Las Vegas once, and it's an incredible part of the world. If you ever get a chance to do it, I highly recommend it. They shoot some incredible scenes, and that seems like a wonderful part of living in a van is you do get to wake up with some incredible views that no one could ever possibly afford. Overall, though, I kind of found it a little bit empty. It's like, what are you saying? What is this film actually about? It's not terribly entertaining. It's not terribly informative. It's just a bit weird. But it's kind of that middling, mediocre, inoffensive thing. It sounds like it's saying something, but it really isn't, that the Academy loves to award. And I'm going to sound like a complete arsehole here, but Chloe Zhao ticks a lot of those diversity boxes that they want to tick.
It's fair.
And not saying she's not award. She's not saying she's not award. She's not deserving. She does a wonderful job with this film, I'm sure. But I'm just saying, let's face it. There's been a lot of controversy about the Oscars so white in recent years.
White and male.
White and male. She's not white. She's not a male. It's a good year to be not white and male with a film, and a very weak year for the Oscars.
Yeah, we'll touch on the Oscars, the nominations list a little bit later, but yeah,
it's a weak year. There's not been a lot out, but shall I move on? Because I don't want to go too long with it. I went to the movies on Saturday night with a friend of the show, Patria, who dropped in unannounced, sort of, and we went up the road to see a film I've been wanting to see for quite some time, actually. And I'll just take off a side note for a minute. One of the great advantages of COVID at the moment, the fact that we talked about this a year ago, the films that would normally be filling cinemas right now didn't get made a year ago.
Yeah.
So stuff sits in the cinemas for ages now because there's nothing to replace it. So if you don't see the film the first 2 weeks it comes out, especially if it's a little one, you don't necessarily miss out. You've kind of got to be sitting around for a while. So I've been trying to see The Dry for a while. The Dry is an Australian film. Yay! Woo! I can't remember the last time I went to the cinema to see an Australian film. It might have been Hounds of Love, which was about 3 or 4 years ago. And this is a wonderful, wonderful Australian film. So straight up, I will recommend it to anybody who has a chance to go and see it.
Okay.
It is a 2020 movie. It does star Eric Bana, one of our international stars, and someone I just don't think gets enough work anymore. I really like him as an actor.
We've talked about him in the past, and I don't know whether it's just a matter of personal taste or choice of projects, but yeah, he pops up in some weird things, and then he'll disappear for a while. And he was in a special correspondence with Ricky Gervais a few years ago. He was in King Arthur. Now he's doing this. He's all over the shop. It's interesting.
Dirty John was a decent show on Netflix, and he was playing against type there a little bit. But maybe he's just one of these weird guys. I think I've talked about it before. He got paid a shit ton of money to do Hollywood movies, and he just kicks back in his mansion and enjoys like living with his family and shit. What a weirdo.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's what I would do. Like make some money movies and just enjoy life. And he makes maybe films like this, which is great to see him popping up. It is directed by Robert Connolly, who is a reasonably well-known Australian director. He made things like Ballabo, which is about 10 years old now. Again, if you're an overseas person, I do not expect you to have heard of any of his stuff. He directed The Slap, which did get remade in the United States. Yes. So you might have heard about that. He's reasonably Romulus, My Father. He was involved in that. Lots of TV. Reasonably well-known kind of guy around the traps. There's some fairly familiar names in the faces in the cast.
I'm seeing one of the Australian icons, Bruce Spence.
Bruce Spence, best known for his role in Mad Max 2 as the helicopter pilot. He also played the Black Lieutenant in Lord of the Rings. He was in Dark City as Mr. Wall. If you haven't seen Dark City, what the fuck are you doing? Stop watching. Go and watch that film now. And there's a younger cast in there of people who've been in other things overseas who you might recognize. What is the drive? Aaron Falk, Eric Banner, returns to his drought-stricken hometown to attend a tragic funeral. His return over the decades-old wound, the unsolved death of a teenage girl. So this is kind of a two-track story. So on the one hand, he plays a federal police officer, which is kind of like our version of the FBI, sort of. And he comes back to his hometown, which is near Upper Kambukta West, in the middle of butt-fuck nowhere, and to attend the funeral of one of his childhood best friends, who is basically being accused or assumed to have killed his wife and son and then killed himself. On the one hand, his best friend's parents beg Aaron to investigate and look a little bit deeper into the killings, feeling that their son would never have done that. At the same time, as it notes, when he lived there as a child, he was involved in the death, or he was a person of interest, or what do you want to call it, of the death of a teenage girl or of one of his /girlfriend friends as a kid. Okay. And he was basically chased out of town as a result. And that was never resolved, and people still remember that and haven't forgiven him for they hold him responsible for what happened, whether or not he actually did or didn't, or will be revealed in time. So this film doesn't do anything particularly original. It's kind of it is very tropey. You're people who are familiar with your sort of murder mystery sort of tropes will be very familiar with what's going on, but it's done really fucking well.
Okay.
And it's shot beautifully. It's shot, I think it's shot up in southern New South Wales somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where, but it's gorgeous. The town they shot it in is absolutely gorgeous. And I was just going, oh, I can feel that place. It feels like, Horsham and Castlemaine apparently was shot in Victoria, here in Victoria. And I could feel that town because I have someone who grew up in Australia. It really, in a fairly small town, or who spent time in small towns as a young person, it really evoked that sort of the dying days of summer, the dry, the scorching heat. You know, the buildings are beautiful. It's incredibly well shot. On the flip side, I did figure out what happened at the end of the film about halfway through. So I feel like I owe you an apology for the fact that I had to go at you about that a couple of times. And I'm like, quickly, there's this one scene halfway through the film, and I'm like, oh, he did it. It was him. Because this thing just happened here, and that's incredibly obvious because you showed me this thing here. That basically says it was him.
Yep.
and then it kind of tried to do a couple of swerves in the back half of him going, whoa, look at what this person's doing. Maybe it was them. And you're like, yeah,
But it wasn't. It was him.
It was him. But it was him because that thing happened before where you showed me that thing. And I'm like, you wouldn't show me that. Why would that scene be there? Why would you even mention that character in that scene if it wasn't them? And it was that person. But the end of the film was really nicely done. Again, nothing particularly original. But I don't have a problem with that as long as you're performing at a very high. The bar is very high if you're going to be doing something we've all seen before. The performances to a person are brilliant. I would be interested in seeing your opinion of it if you ever get a chance to see it from someone who grew up overseas. Maybe you don't have that same sort of nostalgic feel. There are a couple of points in it where you're like, yeah, that's a bit convenient. That's incredibly convenient. That thing just happened to happen right there. And Eric was the only person who was smart enough to figure it out. Like, nobody would have tried doing what Eric just did in the last 30 years, would they? No. So I'm trying to be a little bit vague about it because I would like people who are listening to have a chance to enjoy it if they ever get around to it. But this is a really wonderful little Australian film. I would love it if this film got some distribution overseas, or it ended up on a Netflix or a Prime or something overseas, because this is what we do really well in this country. We do really good film. There's so much talent in this film. If you go for, I'm not going to waste time. If you go through and just look at the main cast, the vast majority of them have worked extensively overseas, and that all comes from here, right? And it's really fascinating that a 2020 film managed to, because they probably couldn't go overseas, a lot of them, managed to get them all in one place and make a really wonderful little murder thriller. And I'd like to see, I wish we saw more of it. And one of the, again, back to the COVID world, one of the great benefits is, like, we're making a shit ton of movies right now in Australia. Queensland's going off like a frog in a sock. Thor: Love and Thunder has been made up there. George Clooney and Julia Roberts, I think, are coming up to shoot a movie up in Queensland somewhere.
About that,
apparently, Queensland is just going off because we are so safe with COVID right now. I just love it if there's and I love the international productions coming here, but it'd be wonderful if it was actually a local production or two taking advantage of it as well.
Yeah. No, I think it's because I have noticed that there's been a bit more, especially because we quite often there's sort of like when I went to the cinema to what did I watch at the cinema? Oh, it was Chaos Walking. There were some adverts for like the Asian Film Festival, and it's like, cool, we're starting to get some of that. And I've seen a lot more of the small run Australian Film Festival kind of things, and so, like, some of the streaming channels over here, like 10, they've had a bit more of a focus on Australian movies and things. It's really nice to actually be able to showcase it, because it sucks that it takes a pandemic to shine a spotlight on one of the best track record sources of talent for film and TV of Australia, to actually get that spotlight, but it's nice nonetheless that it's still getting there.
And just a note, so for example, this film opened in Australia on the 1st of Jan, and it's still in cinemas, nice. And the cinema was COVID full.
Watch out, Avatar. Gunning for you.
It does have a release date of the 21st of May in the United States. So if you are one of the bots who listens to the show, there is no release date in Russia at this point in time, but you might be able to pirate it by then, I guess.
Yeah.
If you're one of the CIA bots located in the US, in one of the biggest cities that does have something better than a multiplex, I hope you have a chance to see The Dry. It's a great Australian film.
Excellent. Oh, I've just been thinking about where I'm going to go after Night of the Generals, and I've got some great options.
I think it's some very famous names, I thought you'd be right. Should we talk quickly about Oscars?
Let's talk about the Oscars, because I feel like Oscars 2021, here we go. Every year I get less and less of the movies. I get to watch less and less of the movies.
This year,
And
actually, we had no real excuse for it this year in a lot of ways because three of the Best Picture Oscars are, I think, Netflix films.
which I think is very, very telling of just how bad Hollywood has been hit, considering like one of the biggest mouths in Hollywood of Steven Spielberg saying, "Oh no, Netflix movies shouldn't win Oscar movies and things like that." It's always been a hubbub when like Roma and The Irishman got nominated and stuff like that. So everyone's going, "Oh, is this going to be the year that Netflix wins wins all the Oscars and things like that?" And Roma did very well, and then suddenly to have three, it's like, well, either that's telling of the changing times or best of a bad bunch.
I was going to say, like, I think Mr. Spielberg might have to suck it up this year because if he doesn't want Bad Boys for Life to be nominated for Best Picture, because like we had basically 2 months of actual cinema releases in the US, and it'd be like Tenet and Bad Boys for Life and Doolittle. Like,
no,
so it's kind of you kind of got to go. Well, either we let the streaming films in, or there's no.
It would be the shortest award ceremony ever, and people would appreciate that.
So I think this is going to be the straw that broke the camel's back. Like you can't not let them in next year.
Exactly. It's you've made it. It's going to happen. It's just going to be the thing now, and especially the film industry still hasn't recovered. We are apparently, touch wood, coming to the other side of the worst of this, but it's still going to be another year before any of the big, like when you think of like Oscar bait movies, Dunkirk and those sorts of things, it's going to be a long time before those are getting made again because there's just no money.
It'd probably just be sort of picking up, I would imagine.
Yeah,
nowish kind of thing, but you're right. There's going to be a long tail to this. So, actors and I think I sort of said this is a weak year. So I haven't seen any of the films that have been that had actors in them that were nominated for Best Actor.
I am very curious to see Sound of Metal though. That looks like it could be interesting, and Riz Ahmed is a great actor. He has proven that he's got some chops on him, so I would like to see that.
None of the films in here are saying I don't want to see them. I would kind of look at Mank a few times going, that could be interesting.
I mean, it's David Fincher.
And The Father hasn't been released here yet. So that doesn't help. I've heard Ma Rainey's Black Bottom could be interesting. So in terms of supporting actors, Sacha Baron Cohen, I've seen his film. I have not seen any of the others. I'm looking forward to seeing Judas and the Black Messiah.
Yeah,
and
me too.
Very, very hopeful that Daniel Kaluuya finally gets the Oscar he deserves because I think he's a very, very fine actor.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
In terms of actress, I'm very much, as I sort of said earlier, I'm pretty sure it's going to go to Frances McDormand. But I have a theory what's going to happen this year, so you can track it at home, people. Okay. Promising Young Woman is far and away the best film that has been released in the last 12 months. By a fucking country mile, at least as far as the ones that I have seen. Carey Mulligan absolutely deserves the Best Actress Oscar. Emerald Fennell absolutely deserves Best Director, and it absolutely deserves Best Picture. It will not win any of those categories because they're going to go safe, and it's far too confronting for the Academy. Frances McDormand is going to win Nomadland. Chloe Zhao is going to win for Nomadland. I'm pretty sure Nomadland is going to win Best Picture. But Emerald Fennell is going to get Best Original Screenplay because, as we all know, that is the consolation prize category that Quentin Tarantino has won twice now. Because we don't want to actually say your film's got lots of violence and swearing and N-words in them.
Yeah,
but it's kind of good. I just don't want to give you the Best Picture.
We just can't. We'll give you a thank you note after the show.
It's the award you give people when you don't really want to give them an award.
I think also quite telling of the rough year that it is looking at Best Animated Feature Films. The fact that Onward has been nominated, it is not at all good when you compare it to other Pixar movies. It's got a little bit of a heart to it, but it's not much. When you're going up against Soul, come on.
It's an unbackable favorite.
Why? I don't understand why Disney Pixar would go, oh yeah, we're going to push and split the audience. Why not just go, yeah, Soul is so obviously a better, stronger movie. Let's just push that. We won't put Onward up for contention. Why would you do that? That's why I'm a little worried for Daniel Kaluuya for Best Actor in Supporting Role, because there's another Lakeith Stanfield is also from Judas and the Black Messiah. So I wonder, is it going to split it there? And I wonder if someone like Sacha Baron Cohen might come up from behind, or Paul Raci, and just take advantage of having two prominent contenders split the difference.
It would be. I like Sacha Baron Cohen as an actor. I would be disappointing if he won for that film, because I didn't think he was. I think if you go back a couple of months, I did talk about it, and I didn't think it was anything to write home about. He wasn't anything to write home about in it. Actress in the leading role, we talked about. Actress in the supporting role, I can't tell you how much I want Maria Bakalova to win this. Like, just to hear somebody have to read out, Maria Bakalova wins for Borat's subsequent movie film, delivery of prodigious bribe to American regime for make benefit once glorious nation of Kazakhstan.
I want that. I want that so much.
In fairness, I have not seen any of the other contenders. But I think when I talked about Borat 2, I remember noting that Maria Bakalova was actually really fucking good in it, and the fact that she's like her first feature and she went head to head with Sacha Baron Cohen and didn't take a backward step. I really hope she wins it.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's kind of, there's a lot of movies that have been nominated, and you just kind of go, that came out?
I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
Like Thomas Vinterberg has been nominated for Another Round. Never even heard of it.
Nope.
Apparently it's showing.
Wait, is that the one with Viggo Mortensen?
Yeah, I think it's Mads Mikkelsen's in it.
Mads Mikkelsen, that's the one.
Yeah,
yes.
the one we were talking about him last week for being in the villain squad.
Yeah.
I think it's a Swedish film, or it's a Scandinavian film at least.
There's elements of the trailer that I've seen that remind me of particularly the earlier work of Lars von Trier, where it's kind of like, all right, this is skirting on that point of, this is experimental movie. I don't know what it's about. It seems to be about a guy dealing with alcoholism.
4 friends, all high school teachers, test a theory that they will improve their lives by maintaining a constant level of alcohol in their blood.
That sounds like something Von Trier could do.
That theory is completely bunk because Australia exists. We've tested it. It's been done.
And the Irish as well.
Touche. So anyway, interesting. I'd like to see it at some point, but I had to kind of look it up. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but you're right. So directors, we've got Fincher in there for Mank, Minari, which is a film I've seen posters for. As I said, Chloe Zhao for Nomadland, and Promising Young Woman Emerald Fennell. As I've given my opinion, I think Nomadland's going to win because it's safe.
Yeah.
I really hope I'm wrong. If you ever one that kind of stood out to me, and of course it would stand out to me, is Best Original Score.
Oh, yes.
Because Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, so being a massive Nine Inch Nails fan, Trent Reznor has been nominated twice.
Yeah.
For Mank and for Soul. Along with Atticus Ross and John Baptiste for Soul, and just Atticus Ross for Mank. Again, I haven't seen Mank, but I have a feeling, because I really quite liked Soul's soundtrack, and I know I called it out when I saw it at the time. Like, I noticed the soundtrack, and I don't notice soundtracks the way you do. And I think I got the Globe.
Yeah, I just think that Soul is probably going to win all the awards that it is put forward for. I think it is, without having, unfortunately, I haven't had an opportunity to see Wolfwalkers on Apple TV Plus. I might try and get round to that because I do actually have a membership for that. A Shaun the Sheep movie, Farmageddon.
I didn't even know that came out.
That kind of sounds a bit like the year that Jimmy Neutron movie got nominated for an award, because I think there were only 3 animated movies that got offered the chance. I think it was one of the Disney ones, one of the DreamWorks ones, and Jimmy Neutron. And then Over the Moon. I've been very touch and go on any of the Netflix animated movies. Some of them have been fantastic. One thing that I will give Netflix for their animated movies is they do like to experiment with style of delivery. A lot of them are CGI, but even then they'll still kind of put like an odd frame rating to it, so it still looks like it's stop motion and things like that. So they're experimenting a lot, or they're allowing experimental animators to come in. I've just not been particularly enamored with any of the actual stories that they're telling. I think if they can get something like the equivalent of Persepolis, or some of the more unusual elements of like Pompoko or Grave of the Fireflies or anything like that, that's when they're going to start really cooking with some interesting stuff, because it's much like what we've talked about in a long time is the Animatrix and how those styles are so varied and amazing animation. If they can just play with that and get really interesting stories that just happen to be animation, they could be onto something very interesting. I don't know whether there's money in it for them, though, which is a shame.
Is there anything else that stood out to you in the noms this year?
No, not really. I wonder how Olivia Colman is going to do for supporting actress. Heard, she's been on quite a tear the last few years. A lot of praise for pretty much every project that she's been in. So I think that the supporting role is going to be an interesting one, especially when you're going up against Glenn Close. This is kind of, she's been nominated, give her the award.
It's exactly the kind of film it would give an award for. I've seen the trailer for The Father a couple of times now.
Yeah.
And it looks like it screams Oscar bait.
Okay, yeah. But the movie that I really want to see is Minari. I keep on seeing it pop up here and there, and it looks just really interesting and up my alley. So I will get around to finding my way to see that.
I think if it's not playing, it is playing in cinemas here in Melbourne now.
Yeah, cool. I know what I'm. Oh no, I don't have any time off for a fortnight. Yay!
It sucks.
Yeah.
As I said, it'll probably stick around for a while.
Yeah, but I kind of feel like people aren't going to be as invested in the Oscars this year, because kind of going to the movies has not really been a thing that we've been able to do. And because there's not been a blockbuster movie released on streaming services, really, it's kind of, all right, I'm more interested in what's going to win the TV shows. And most people are probably going to go, well, it's going to be WandaVision, because that's the show that everyone's just been talking about. Positively or negative, that's just had the most buzz.
And it was, again, it's not been a whole lot come out in the last year. But that and Tiger King, I don't think it's going to win any awards.
Yeah. I'm not watching that movie. Just not. I refuse.
Should we call it a night?
I think we should. Yeah, it's been a shorter episode than last time, but like I say, this is probably the quiet before the storm that is Zack Snyder's Justice League.
I am so curious to see that. I'm so curious.
Yeah, it seems like overall the reviews comparing it to Joss Whedon's Justice League seem to be more favorable overall, but they all definitely seem to be putting the asterisk. If you like Zack Snyder, you'll really like this. If you tolerated Joss Whedon's Justice League, you'll probably enjoy this to a certain degree. No one's kind of going, this is rewritten superhero movies for the future or anything. And
I think in fairness, we sat in the tolerated category.
I think so. But going back to it like I did the other week, it's like...
It doesn't get better. The more I was in hospital for broken ankle, probably, I don't know, 6 months or so after this happened, after
Mm-hmm.
the film came out. And I got Foxtel with my private
Sure.
sketchy Foxtel with my TV. And there was that included 4 channels. And
You didn't realize it, but it wasn't Foxtel. It was just Boxtel. It was literally.
I know a genuine Boxtel when I see it. And and Justice League was on the movie channel, which is the one that came in clearest. And I think I watched it 3 times in 3 days because you're in a hospital bed, right? Like there's nothing much to do.
Yeah,
so
this was before Switch.
And it didn't get any better every time I watched it. You're like, you watch it, the more you watch it, the worse it gets.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, and it's even harder looking at it and hearing so much of the horrible work environment as they were making it, care of Joss Whedon and others. It's like, oh, yeah, it was a miracle that this was not Suicide Squad B, that when this got delivered to cinemas. This is, wow, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, we will have our initial impressions and a bit of a deep dive, I imagine, next week.
All right. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, just to wrap up the show, we talked about Syriana, our most recent Chain movie. Travis has chosen a classic Christopher Plummer, The Night of the Generals, for our next link in the chain. I talked about the 2013 Spike Lee version of Oldboy and the new hotness in the anime world of Demon Slayer on Netflix. Travis talked about Nomadland, the Oscar bait movie, and the far superior movie, The Dry, starring Eric Bana. We also went through our Oscar thoughts. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in, and we will see you all next time.
Good night.
Good night.